has gone with Big Priest. Right. We do see the Spiteful Summoner version from Kranich here, but to get things going, he's starting things off with the Hunter. A hand against the Priest because you want a little bit more mid-game sustainability, and Candles isn't really getting the job done. But for Kuonet, this is a very respectable hand, as Galaka Crawler will very possibly find a target in this matchup.
Yeah, Patch's deck with the Hunter. This Hunter is interesting. Hunter started off as being very spellless, spellful, and ended up with spellless now. Yeah. Like, you literally just play Call of the Wild now, unless you're testing and you put in animal companions, but we'll talk about that later. And just play the expensive cards to go with that Spiteful Summoner now. So spells, not a thing we see, so pirates come into play.
That's right. People realizing that while Kill Command is obviously an incredibly powerful card, getting the guaranteed but insanely big minion off of Summoner and Archivist is way more valuable, as going into this first match, while it's a very strong start for Kranich with a almost perfect 1-2-3 curve, basically perfect actually, there's very strong counterplay for Kuonet.
Yeah, this is going to be really important, as they always are. Razormaw really wants to get rid of this North Shire, not just because of the ability, but just because it's a 1-3 that's getting in the way. Yeah. And Poisonous is the way to do that.
The perfect way to do so. I suppose +1/+1 would have been slightly better, because then you're left with a 2-1 instead of a 1-1, but you miss one face damage, so positives and negatives to lines of play, obviously.
So Kranich with his Bear Shark is like the only counterplay he's going to get in this game, because Kuonet has everything lined up into it. It's so hard to see how Kranich can win this game of Hearthstone from where we're sat. From where he's sat, he's actually got the perfect curve, like you suggested. So he'll be trying to get as much damage into that face rapidly before maybe Dragonfire Potion. But we can see Kuonet's just drawn the absolute best possible hand here.
Yeah, he's got a very, very powerful start indeed here, as he even gets a very nice Holy Smite to round things out in the early turns. When Eaglehorn comes down, he's got the Ooze for the Pirate, he's got the Galaka, as you said. But it's also worth bringing up that this Hunter deck for Kranich, it's not the standard, well, I shouldn't say standard, some of the more aggressive face Hunter decks we see floating around now, which run the kill commands, very low curve trying to burst your opponent out. This one does have late game scaling potential. If you can get Summoner, Archivist, or even Call of the Wild itself, you've got a really good shot at pushing the last bit of extra damage to pull yourself over the finish line.
Yeah, unfortunately that last bit of extra damage is currently standing at 29.
Right.
For sure. But yeah, if he does go turn 6 Summoner into a good hit, into maybe an Archivist somewhere in there, weaving a Corridor Creeper, maybe actually draw a Call of the Wild, like you say, get all that lot going in a row. Kuonet doesn't have the combo pieces and the mass removal that he will need to cope with that yet, but the thing is, he's going to draw into it. He's drawn all the early game early, and that means that all the late game will come late.
That's exactly right. There's some cards. I mean, it's a fairly anti-aggro list from Kuonet, so you're right. There's a lot of good draws in here. Things that are a bit too slow, maybe like gadgets and things like that. But interestingly, he did just throw down the Ooze beforehand because he thought that the 3 health was worth it to take out the Ooze, just to combat against the Bear Shark, sorry. But considering Wild Pyro could have come down there and was fairly resistant against everything other than Captain.
Yeah, very interesting, because the Pyro, the job didn't need to be done. So the Alley Cats are gone. There's not that many 1 or 2 health minions in the deck, oddly enough, for such a early game deck in the Hunter. So he could have played the Pyro to challenge. He would have wasted mana. But keeping back, there's 4 weapons in this deck from Kranich, I believe. So keeping back the Ooze would have been a potential play. But that's a big win for Kranich. We were lining up those cards one-on-one, saying how they would destroy each other. But now Kranich is actually going to be able to force some early damage through, and that makes that mid-game you were talking about so much more powerful now.
Yeah, that's true, but obviously in this instance it didn't work out for Kuonet because the bow was there. But in a lot of instances where the bow is not there for Hunter, we did see an almost full mulligan, and the only card that was kept had come down in the Razormaw. So we had no read on the fact that there was a bow there. And if it wasn't that, then the Wild Pyro would actually be pretty good at later stages in the game, because once the smaller minions start coming down, if you can combo that with a Spirit Lash, that's another powerful board clear, and you do need those clears against Hunter. But it does mean now that Kranich is starting to push some very respectable face damage.
Yeah, and 2 minions that are just difficult for Priest to deal with. The old thing we always talk about, the 4 attack minion, is a nightmare, but this 5 health Bear Shark can't be targeted, and Dragonfire Potion is the only solution. Luckily for Kuonet, he has it, but Kranich might get a decent reload the turn after. Now he has to decide how much he wants to commit. So he will have that Dragonfire very much in mind and try to commit to the absolute minimum that is still a threatening amount of damage.
Yeah, he certainly will. Given that there was a card, Shadow Visioned, which has not come down yet, he knows that if Dragonfire Potion was presented, it very likely would have been picked. The downside for Kranich's play, which I was actually just about to praise him for, has come into effect, as the patches has been drawn before the captain could come down, which is obviously kind of unfortunate, but it was something you were saying to me yesterday, is that, patches being drawn is something you do need to factor in. It's not just completely screwed by RNG. There are ways you can play around it by just throwing down the pirates.
Yeah, there's several stages of learning to play with patches, right? The first stage is, oh my goodness, I might draw my patches, which is just a silly way to look at it, because you're probably not going to. You should just develop your board. Then the second phase is actually never, ever. Like, you go too far the other way, so I'll never draw my patches. Well, if you've gone through 9 of your cards, that's a third of your deck. You're going to draw patches 1 in 3 at this point.
Yeah, and it does come down here in the end, just because it's a decent play onto the board, but there is still a fair bit of refill available for Kranich after the Dragonfire does come down.
But it's a way of using the patches that can't be crawlered.
That's true.
So it's nice time. He's snuck a little bit of use out of that patches there. He's played around Crawler from the start, and playing it now means that, sure, if he's got Dragonfire Potion, I don't like it, but it doesn't get Galaka. And if it does get Galaka, then I'm probably just going to beat my opponent up with my 7-5.
This is the point where, unless a big card can be drawn, however, for Kranich, he is going to start falling behind, because there's the Crawler to deal with that captain. If nothing too threatening comes down, it could just be Velen heal for 4, which puts a massive body on the board to start fighting back against what's coming down for Kranich. He needs to find one of the 5 power cards left in his deck in Summoner, Archivist, or Call of the Wild.
One thing that does happen in the Hunter matchup versus Priest that other aggro decks don't necessarily have, those. Your hero power, obviously not counting the Velen, does cancel out the Priest healing. And we have seen games in other tournaments where it looks like the Priest is stabilised, but the fact they can never gain health easily until they get their Priest of the Feast or whatever can just count against them.
It's true. It's probably less effective in a deck where there's no kill commands. One bow has already been used, so the ability to push that extra bit of burst comes basically only from Call of the Wild and maybe a Huffer of... Oh no, Animal Companion isn't in there, so it would have to be the Huffer from Call of the Wild to push it out.
We did get a little insight into Kranich's thinking there last turn. He pressed the hero power button first.
Right.
Which means that he's thinking of... Because he's so low on resources, he wants to make sure he weaves one in every single turn. That is obvious. Yeah, but he was pressing it to get it out of the way. It's like, okay... This is the mana I'm going to spend doing this. This is the order of my thinking. He's actually... Most people would hero power last, just out of habit.
At the same time, though, maybe he should have considered more heavily going a bit more all-in with minions, because... The thing is, if he just drips them out one at a time, the Priest may have the resources to deal with them, but now that he's seen Dragonfire Potion, maybe he should have just pushed all in, gone without hero power for one turn, and said, this Diamol very possibly will attack twice if I just go all in now, and there's not this small bit removal to get rid of it.
Yeah, not drawing the Spiteful Summoner, obviously, is one of the downsides of this Spiteful Summoner deck, in fairness. It's one of the reasons why it's very hard, despite the fact it's just won a big tournament, to assess Spiteful Summoner as a card, because there are a lot of downsides, but the upside is huge. The downsides are you might draw your cards, you might not draw the Summoner, you don't want to build your deck around it too hard. The upside is if you go turn 6 Spiteful Summoner, you kind of win the game.
Yeah. So now Kuonet has got a lot of thinking to do. First of all, he's going to be thinking, how much can I get away with not killing here to keep my minions nice and healthy while also staying alive? Because obviously, if Call of the Wild were to be drawn off the top, that would be pretty terrible for Kuonet, and he just needs to make sure that wouldn't be instant lethal for Kranich, so he'll be killing off what he can here, and he does realise in the end it's worth to sacrifice his minions, not take the value trade, and just end up killing off the biggest minion there is.
Yeah, and making sure he gets the use out of that Mind Blast while he has the Velen, because if the Velen sticks on the board, he wins anyway, and if it doesn't stick on the board, you need to have got that extra damage out of the Mind Blast for your win conditions. But Kranich just not picking up the good stuff in the right order here.
Ooh, that's... It's probably not actually even that important here. He's just going to win without it. He can just go silence on one of the minions. He probably won't play that for the rest of the game and just keep smacking to face.
Trying to work out if it's actually lethal. It's really close, right?
No, I don't think so, because he'd kill off the Velen as soon as he attacks in, as soon as he plays the Anduin, so then it's only 2 damage going in your turn.
Exactly.
So, yeah. He just needs to make sure...
Just a casual 11.
What do I die to? If he goes for silence, heal up, he's not dead to Call of the Wild, because there can't be a hero power, and it would be Huffer 4/5, and then an extra 4 on top of that.
Quick, yeah, with that Leok that comes out. So
pretty close, actually, but...
Just going through all the options, he knows he's going to win if he doesn't make a mistake here, so just adding everything up.
But then he's thinking, if I go for silence now and Call of the Wild is drawn, I can't silence the Misha to push for lethal with my Velen. So maybe it's worth, as he's doing, taking it a little bit slower, not pushing for lethal, and saving the silence probably for that taunt. As a 1-drop is drawn for the 3rd turn in a row?
Yeah, 3 turns in a row, just not picking up any of the gas he needs. And this deck has plenty of gas, and not that many 1-drops. It only has 9 1-drops in the entire deck.
Only.
No, but yeah, sure, but it's 3 in a row. It's like a 1 in 30 chance or something.
Well, actually, it's even got 2 candle shots as well, so it's like 8, 9. Oh, no, you're right, 9 1-drops.
That's how 9 works, right?
Oh, yeah, the one that's
7
bigger
plus
than
2.
8. Right, yeah. That's some quick maths.
Okay, so Kuonet in a very similar position to last turn, just working out how to get the most out of all of this, how much to tidy up.
Yeah.
But now he has even more considerations because he can just cycle this Thanos if he wants to go the Anduin route.
Yeah.
And clear the board.
I'm kind of wondering from Kuonet, I think I agree with his silence not coming down last turn because of exactly Call of the Wild. And looking at it now, if he uses a card for Anduin, then he can't use the silence again to get another prop with this hero power. And here he is going to be 1 damage off of lethal, I believe. So while he can push for it and bring his opponent down to 1 health, I don't believe there's any way he can lose. So I like from Kuonet here, being cautious, always figuring out how can I possibly lose in this instance. Because it's one of those situations where it's not necessarily obvious how far ahead he is, but I think he will have realised at this point he has basically just won.
Yeah, and Grand Archivist just turns up as if to laugh at Kranich spitefully. And 1-0 to Kuonet in this first game of the first match of this 2 days of star-studded Hearthstone action.
Yeah, this is kind of the downside of Kranich's strategy, because obviously Control Warlock is the best anti-aggro tool you have in your arsenal at the moment. But Kazaka's Priest is a great way to pick up the slack. If you can get those anti-aggro cards, if you build it to deal with aggressive decks, as Kuonet has so clearly done, then these kind of spiteful summoner decks from Kranich just often cannot quite get over the finish line. So although that is the probably most powerful deck against Kranich out of the way from Kuonet, he's still got his work cut out for him to take it back.
Yeah, and we are going to see some more unusual decks from Kuonet, right? We've got the
that is true.
Druid deck, which I believe is not Jade Druid. It's something entirely different.
It is indeed Quest Malagos Druid, which is probably not what Kuonet wants to line up against this aggressive lineup from Kranich, as it doesn't run a single copy of Plague. It's very, very weak to aggro, and that's probably why he ended up banning the Paladin, because while maybe because the Priest is a little bit slower from Kranich, he can start to get some things going, maybe ramp up to UI, he's never, ever going to be doing that against the Paladin.
Yeah, that Paladin deck is all in right from the start, and Swipe doesn't do enough against it either. And it's an interesting choice to bring that deck with no aggro defense at all. It must have been in his mind to ban aggro, which is weird because most of the people here want to ban either Priest or Warlock right from the start. Both those classes obviously insanely strong right now, but we have seen a wide variety of strategies, which we'll explain to you as the day goes on.
Yeah, and here we can see Kuonet lining up his own aggressive deck here in the Tempo Mage up against the Rogue. And when your opponent gets Keleseth and Shadowstep, this can very quickly spiral out of control. But at the same time, Kuonet has got pretty close to the, well, I wouldn't say the nuts, because you can get some pretty disgusting stuff with Mana Worm and Lackey. But this is pretty lackey in its own right.
Yeah. Very, very lucky indeed. Getting rid of the Sorcerer's Apprentice there because there's no real clear turn to play her. She's not going to gain you anything by playing her with the Archaeologist turn after the Archaeologist turn. So trying to find a secret cheater to go with a secret he's going to have on turn 3.
So now for Kranich, he's left with a really difficult decision of how he plays this, because, to be honest, he doesn't want to coin out the Keleseth. He would much rather save it for something like Hero Power Coin Deckhand on 2 or something like that, just to save that coin for a more impactful minion later on down the line. Maybe he's thinking, I'm going to be taking so much damage in the early game that it's worth it to get this 2-2 out, and the follow-up of the dagger isn't that bad.
Yeah, you've got to stop this mage from hitting you with their minions. We're going to say this multiple times through the next 15 matches of Hearthstone. If the mage gets in any relevant damage at all with their minions, then whatever it's playing it loses the game. If whatever it's playing it can stop them hitting you in the face, the mage actually just can't get the damage through often enough, quick enough. That's why the ice blocks are there.
And an interesting secret being drawn here for Kuonet, the one-of ice block in his deck. Not the best secret he could have got here, but also not the worst, to be honest, because Counterspell very possibly wouldn't have done anything for a long time. And Ice Block, even though it's obviously a zero tempo play, because it's not affecting the board at all, it does allow him to just start going in with his burn spells and activate that Pyroblast if he can get to that point.
Yeah, it's just one extra turn. Basically makes your Pyroblast cast 9. It's a weird way of looking at it, but that's how it works out. And Kranich having to face tank a little damage there. Again, you try not to have to. And now the Ice Block looks like a much better pickup.
This is looking pretty nice here for Kuonet. But at the same time, if you thought Corridor Creeper was good as a 5/5, wait until it's a 7/7. 0 mana 7/7s.
Wow, it's not even a Shaman card. It's a neutral card. We can all do that now. We don't have to be Shaman specialists anymore.
Eat your heart out early 2017. Or 2016. Well, time flies, eh?
Yeah, I know, man. It only gets worse as well. So Kuonet looking here, seeing what he can protect on his board. But I don't feel like there's a great reason to trade here.
Well,
it does protect your 4/3 from patches.
Yeah, it protects the 4/3. Obviously, he wants to be going face, but he just needs to figure out how I'm getting in the most damage possible. But, you know, if Kranich is attacking him with his weapon into the 4/3, it's getting in a good amount of damage anyway. So I think I like this line of play. However, leaving yourself vulnerable to patches taking a value trade, now that it will be a 3/3, even without Captain, is a little bit scary. So it's not going to work out all too well, actually, for Kuonet, as he is going to be falling down pretty far behind on board.
Yeah, in the 20s still for Kranich, and with a hand that's going to allow him to counterattack rapidly as well. That's another key. Obviously, the mage, as time goes by, just starts launching stuff at your face. That's like their dying throws if they get behind. Yeah. But if you can finish them off quickly, they don't get to that Pyroblast, you're in a really good spot. Yeah,
I think this is looking really good for Kranich. If you look at the amount of damage in hand for Kuonet, it's 16 and it's cost 14 mana. Which he's just not going to get to that point because he has now lost board control, and I very highly doubt he will ever gain it back in this game.
Interesting to me that Kranich thought it was important that he could face take that 4. I've definitely seen people play this matchup differently, where they maybe drop the deck hand there and just lose the card advantage, take some bad trades, but in return for the bad value, you gain health. And even though that's not normally a Hearthstone trade-off, actually in this matchup, health is time.
Yes, health is very valuable in this matchup. You are correct, especially when your opponent is playing the Ice Block Pyroblast variant. You do need to be afraid. But at the same time, you know, to make room for these cards, he's only playing one Firelands Portal in the Mage deck. Obviously, there's the usual other suite of burn spells. But it's not a ridiculous amount of burn, and I think if you really lock down board control, that's going to be negating so much more damage from minions that it's really worth it over time to make sure you lock down that board control, which, as you said, is so important against the mage. You need to make sure these minions are not attacking your face.
So Kuonet's lifeline is here, the Aluneth. It looks like it might be too slow, but things go crazy pretty quickly. If you can pick up a decent card to play alongside his next Crossbolt, this could still get interesting, although a 7/7 for 0, as you called a couple of turns ago.
It could get pretty interesting.
It's its own definition of interesting.
Oh man, that is not a particularly good card to combo with it, because all the cards he could be countering as we take a look at Kranich's lineup.
There aren't many for one, and he's played Shadow Step already for another.
Exactly. Shadow Step's gone. If he's countering a Backstab, who cares? Nothing on the board is going to stick anyway. A Cold Blood, he's under a ridiculous amount of pressure.
Right, that
as
probably
it is.
doesn't change the clock. It might, but
yeah. So the counterspell really doesn't do all too much. So
he has to consider pinging, and pinging face is an option, pinging a 2/1 is an option as well. He's got to do a lot of serious counting here, which you have to do a lot with this mage deck, unfortunately, for casters. You have to count and stuff.
Oh yeah, that thing.
That thing that we traditionally are not very good at.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on us for it.
Wow.
But on this turn, Kuonet really needs to consider how I'm possibly staying in this game for the next few turns, and he very correctly, I would say, realizes I am not getting to turn 10 if this Corridor Creeper is smacking me in the face for 7 every turn. That's like a minimum 4-turn clock, which just the maths doesn't add up.
It's a bit of a meme when you're talking about mage decks. When you start having to use, like you say, probably correctly, your burn on their minions, you're using your win condition on not losing, and that is usually a bad spot to be in.
In this instance, you know, you're relying... Like, Aluneth is so good in this deck, arguably. I know some people are still... I think it's pretty much considered core at this point.
No, I think now with the Ice Block build, I think Kranich is absolutely fine.
But this is why it's considered good, because you can lock down board control so aggressively in the early turns with Kirintor Mage, the new fantastic card of the runes as well. But when you're this far behind, playing a 6-mana turn to do nothing is just way too
However,
slow.
if he hadn't frozen the Corridor Creep out last turn, this would represent a block proc.
Really?
So he counted ahead roughly how much damage he was expecting and realised that by not going 3 to face that turn, he's bought himself an extra turn to maybe get more damage in when he's on the higher mana turns. It's still a nightmare for him, but he has bought himself that extra bit of turn to maybe get another block from a glyph, something like that, to perhaps limp towards that Pyroblast turn.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Glyph into Frost Nova, glyph into blocks, stuff like that. But even then, he needs to find the mana to push burn spells to face, and he literally only has one in hand, which is just not getting the job done.
So just casually needs to do 20 damage in 2 turns here, or pick up another block from a glyph, which might give him 3 turns, which might make it interesting, but...
Yeah, I think this is pretty much not going to be happening at this point for Kuonet, and I think this is fairly indicative of what's going to be happening for this mage deck against the majority of Kranich's lineup. It's just they're too good at locking down early board control. The rogue is arguably the best one with cards like Backstab and SI7 Agent, obviously in addition to Prince Keleseth that we saw this game. But even for the Hunter, it's with Candle Shot and the Pirates now, does a very good job of just pushing out the early minions from mage.
Yeah, Kuonet has got to get a win with this. It's Conquest, and Mage is like the old school combo druid, though. It has enough ways to cheat that it just isn't ever going to be a massive underdog against much at all. It's always going to have sort of a 40% chance, even against bad matchups, because if it does just get a way of getting cheap stuff into play in the early game, it's going to win some games in Hearthstone.
Exactly.
So it's never going to have a dire match.
With Ice Block and Explosive Runes, you have the ability to ignore the board so much and just start pushing damage to face. And that's one of the ways you beat Warlock. You either just ignore the board, what's happening completely, or you go with Silence. And in this deck, you don't really need that, even though I've seen a couple of lists with Spellbreaker, because you can just push so much damage to face.
This is interesting. I doubt there's a combination where it works out, but double Sorcerer's Apprentice into Arcane Intellect, into Glyph, into Block or something. I don't know.
I like your thinking. It's very optimistic.
It just looks like a combo deck suddenly.
Yeah. I mean, maybe just for a bit of Christmas cheer, you can get a couple of extra secrets to complete the Christmas tree over his head.
Don't give everybody flashbacks to the old yellow baubles. Nobody wants to remember those days.
Nobody wants them. Yeah, fair enough.
Apart from maybe Dr. Boom.
Yeah.
I wonder what he's doing this year for Christmas. Pretty explosive one.
Nice. Thanks
so,
for
there goes the block. It's his only block in the deck.
And I think this is just going to be it now. There's nothing else that can do it apart from.
I'm just going to keep saying Glyph because that's the reason to play on here. Unfortunately, that's all we got.
But I think we're going to see this happening because obviously for the priest there's the ability to heal out of range, which kind of makes it even worse for the mage. Maybe that's the best matchup for Kuonet with this deck because the priest doesn't lock down early board control that well. It's only running obviously the 1/1 drop in Northshire Cleric as opposed to the Litany in all the other decks. And maybe
Litany?
A litany. It means many of.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Here's a Glyph. But he hasn't got any other burn in his hand, even if he gets the Glyph roll here. Seems like he needs 2 Glyph rolls in a row and something else to help out. I don't even know at this point what he's going to have to look for, but still best to look for it. You'll know it when you see it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, even Frost Nova at this point isn't doing it because he hasn't got the Ice Block to freeze face. That's the wrong icy secret, and that's Shatter. Lul.
It goes to 1 game apiece. As you say, you called it, this mage deck may end up having some issues finding a favoured matchup here.
Yeah, I think that's, for Kranich and Kuonet, the deck they were probably most scared of are now out of the way for their opponents. The Raza Priest, obviously insanely powerful. We're maybe not going to be seeing too much of it in this tournament, as it's going to be banned a lot. But also, as you said, the Warlock is going to be gotten rid of a fair amount as well. But for his opponent from Kranich, now that the Rogue is out of the way, that's maybe the deck he was most afraid of, as it has such great early game and also pretty good scaling into the late game as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting format, actually, Conquest, sometimes, because when there are 2 powerful decks, it's sometimes a case of, right, I'm going to ban this one, and sometimes some people seem to be saying, I'm going to let this other deck just win.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just going to not even fight the Highlander Priest. It's almost the attitude of some of the people here. They're going to fight the Warlock or whatever.
Yeah, you see that from Purple and Firebat with their almost identical lineups of them just saying, Warlock is just not going to win against us. We're going to lock down against that deck so hard because they believe all of their decks are very, very strong against it indeed.
Just a reminder, this is not Highlander Priest from Kranich.
That's true. It may shock you to believe, but it is the priest that Zixo brought to Seat Story Cup, fairly similar to it at least, I believe, with the Spiteful Summoners, Grand Archivist in combination with Free from Amber and Mind Controls. Could be fairly strong against some of the decks from Kuonet, but at the same time, none of them rely on big minions all too heavily. Against the Tempo Mage, obviously the biggest thing they're running is Corridor Creepers and things like that, which you're probably dead at that point if you're mind controlling a Creeper. And against the Druid, as soon as Malagos comes down, you're probably just dead, actually.
Yeah, it's just as long as they get to that. So, I mean, it does stop the Druid from able to slowly build the combo, but the Druid doesn't really slowly build the combo most of the time anyway. And Kuonet's going to have another go with this Mage. And we are going to see this matchup we've been talking about with this Spiteful Priest deck.
And so this is a very interesting point here, is that the Corridor Creeper is in hand. It's the only one in Kuonet's deck. Do you think he keeps it, or will it not get cheap quickly enough to be important in this matchup?
Well, he decides it's not going to get cheap quickly enough, but that's a sign that he knows the matchup really well, because that was a decision that would have taken me half an hour to make. So
sadly, you only have a few seconds.
Sadly, I have to make it before Kuonet. Kranich also not having time to keep the Spiteful, even though that's the name of the deck. If it's going to be played on turn 6, you're going to be dead on turn 6. There's no point keeping it.
Exactly.
So both players going for as rapid a start as possible for opposing reasons.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I like this from Kuonet in tossing the Corridor Creeper. I think if either of these decks had patches in them, you could probably consider a lot more heavily keeping it in there. But just because not that many minions are going to be dying in the early game, it's probably more important for Kuonet to find that Mana Worm, the Arcanologist, things like that to really lock down the early game. But it's a very interesting point to raise.
It is something important you raised there as well, because one of the things that people are saying potentially about Corridor Creeper is that when patches rotates out later in the year or early next year, maybe, just maybe, Corridor Creeper won't be busted anymore. Yeah. Maybe it'll just be good.
It would just be a fine card.
Yeah, but at the moment we've got patches and trading into other patches and stuff like that going on, it just becomes so cheap so quickly. So, yeah, this is already post-meta, post-rotation meta.
So, a play from Kuonet here that I don't actually necessarily agree with, I don't think. Going for the Coin Arcanologist, he's obviously setting up ideally to Frostbolt a 2-drop from his opponent on the following turn, but there's not actually that many that are worth Frostbolting, to be honest. If it was only 2 in the Ascendant and the Netherspite Historian, both of which could just be attacked in with or without a ping. So saving back the coin, I think, would probably have been a bit more impactful, because maybe you can fit in some slightly more important spells on the same turn later on down the line.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because on the converse of that is this is now going to do a lot of damage.
Right,
It's 2 in a turn earlier, and if you can deal with any drops that are played, maybe get another 2 in damage, maybe get an extra 4 damage in a lot of scenarios. But against it, like you say, you've got rid of that coin, which may stop you from able to play an early Corridor Creep if you top deck it or whatever. So coin always has to be very carefully balanced. You only get one chance, one turn, where you actually have the same mana as your opponent. The rest of the time you're 1 mana behind them.
It's true, and Kuonet was bailed out with this line of play with the draw of Sorcerer's Apprentice, and then with the draw of Fireball as well, which I wasn't even necessarily expecting to come down now, as he's leaving himself fairly vulnerable to Duskbreaker at this point, actually. He hasn't seen a Netherspite Historian, so he's not quite as afraid of that coming down. But this is kind of about as vulnerable as you're going to be as the Tempo Mage. Unless
on the
you
other
get
side, if you played the Kirin
stars.
Tor into Counterspell, then he would have been super vulnerable
very
to
good
it.
Point,
so
very good point.
you had to find a different line to play around that Duskbreaker, and that's the line he went with. And this is where Twilight Drake becomes really difficult to calculate. This is going to eat minions. It's not going to eat an explosive runes, which is what you might want it to do.
Nah, mate, it's going to eat one Frostbolt.
Slowly.
You freeze that dragon, and then you keep smacking face.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think, like, if Duskbreaker didn't come down now, he probably doesn't have it. Because that would be a great way to lock down this board, because he is going to be afraid of second Fireball, he's going to be afraid of just Frostbolt, things like that. And here for Kuonet, he just is taking the risk there is no Duskbreaker, and even if there is, he's still getting in a very good amount of face damage, which is how he wants to close out this game.
We don't need to trade.
Nah.
Knows the place.
Nah.
Knows where those minions belong.
And now with no dragons in hand, there's not even the ability to discover a Duskbreaker off of the Nether Spy Historian. So it's going to have to be Curious Glimmerroot to look for something like Frostbolt or Glyphs, something like
Ice
that.
block.
Yeah,
it's getting desperate already.
Desperate already, but I suppose he's going with the higher tempo play instead, saying, I'm not that far behind, so as that I can afford to go for something like this. But to be honest, he kind of is this far behind.
That's so much damage he's eaten already. It's looking Glyph into lethal's not quite on, but it's not far off.
Yeah. I like going with this first of all. You can fit in the explosive runes as well. You're probably not going to be playing the counterspell as it just doesn't do all too much.
Actually, Fireball was lethal, I think.
Oh, wow.
Cast the math there.
So probably going to be Flame Strike picked here because Dragon's Fury, you obviously don't want to clear your own board unless he's expecting to fall behind on board. And then it's not that bad, actually. If he can not hit a 2-drop, of which he's taken out both of the Frostbolts from his deck now, if he falls behind to a Duskbreaker, that's a good way to start pulling it back in his favor. But Flame Strike probably also does the same thing, and it means that you can do it even if you're even on board.
Yeah, there's not that much targeted removal in the priest deck because it concentrates on that tempo build.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Spellbinder not particularly great either there. And he just continues this assault on the face.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of these because Mage is a very popular class over this weekend.
Yeah, I've liked this a lot from Kuonet. Obviously, if he got a burn spell from Glyph, that would absolutely close out his plan. He wouldn't even think of going for anything else. But even with this line of play, if we see Tar Creeper coming down now, that is just lethal, I believe. Oh no, he can heal up as well, so it'd be a tiny bit off lethal.
A tiny bit off lethal is not where you want to be at when you've got a handful of 10 drops.
Yeah.
It's not exactly full of them, but you know what I mean.
When it comes to 10 drops, one feels like full.
It really does on turn 6, unless you're a druid, in which you can just cast it.
Yeah. And so it is going to be digging for some kind of a miracle here for Kranich. He does find that Frostbolt I was talking about, which is a really nice way to start fighting back. But obviously the explosive runes would have denied any kind of Tar Creeper coming down potential. So it does mean that it is going to be lethal on board available for Kuonet.
Yep. Mage doing mage-like things. 2-1 to Kuonet in this single elimination best of 5. So Kranich already fighting for his tournament survival on the first hour of the first day.
It's very true, but Kuonet most certainly saved his worst for last in this particular matchup. The Quest Druid is really going to be suffering against these fast decks from Kranich. Obviously, the Dragon Priest, as we see here, is not particularly fast in the early turns. It really fell behind pretty quickly to the Mage, and it might not be able to get up a quick enough of a start to combat against the Quest Druid. But the thing is, even just mid-game minions like Scalebane and Draconid Operative can really punish the slow plays from the Druid.
Yeah, the Druid can't deal with those things quickly. It deals with them by playing big stuff over time, and it's still busy trying to actually set up its combo at the same time, so it doesn't want to just... You don't want to just put a Malygos on the board, although sometimes you have to do that. And yeah, he's going to really struggle to get a win with this, even though he's 2-1 ahead. It's going to be interesting. If he's 30% twice, he's about 50-50 to win the match.
Yeah, and that's a good place to be, just a straight-up race. And for Kuonet, it's not going to be just about the luck of the draw. It's going to be about his play. This does not seem like an easy deck to pilot to me, even from the very start of the game when you're deciding, do I keep the quest or not in this matchup? Very often, you have to throw it away because if you're not hitting those early ramp cards, you're just not going to be winning that game.
Yeah, we saw a lot of throwing away of quests on the release of the quests, like in other decks to control with aggro, but this Druid deck's going to struggle even more if it doesn't have a win condition because it needs to kill you in one turn. But you do have to throw it away a lot of the time.
Well,
but then you're busy messing around with other stuff. But yeah, you're going to well me because turn 10's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, win condition, obviously the Malygos is the ideal kind of wow finisher for what you can do. But that card right there in Ultimate Infestation, if you're just drawing 5 cards, maybe with his good friend Kun the Forgotten King as well, you're probably going to be winning.
Yeah, the problem is you've got to ramp up there. You've got to get up there quickly because this priest deck is sneakily quick.
That's
true. When it does its thing, like the cards sort of rumble along and suddenly you're taking a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's around turn 5 that they really start to turn up the heat because it's things like Scalebane, and on the following turn, Spiteful Summoner for maybe a 10-drop can be absolutely absurd, as Kuonet is keeping the Jungle Giants in this matchup, and I think that is usually correct anyway, and when you've got the Jade Blossom in addition to that, you've already secured yourself some very strong early game.
Yeah, early strong development.
Okay.
Strong early game. Yeah, maybe not so much.
For what
I know what you mean.
trying to
sure,
do.
for what it's trying to achieve. You're getting towards your aim. That can be considered strong. Just using some semantics there to be awkward,
Of
like
course.
I do.
But for Kranich here, he can punish the fact that Kuonet is going to be ramping on the early turns, because cards that have active effects like Shadow Ascendant, Knife Juggler, Direwolf, things like that really want to be killed off as quickly as possible. But with the pickup of Wild Growth as well, Kuonet's early game has actually got pretty respectable, not even just for this deck, just in general.
Yes, now he can ramp away, and he's just going to plan where he wants to be at the end of that ramp, because with no card draw, actual card draw anyway, he's going to want to plan it. But there's not much he can really do right now. He's just going to have a think about what he wants to do given various situations.
Right.
The obvious stuff is just to ramp and see where you end up.
You do just ramp as much as you can, but the interesting inclusion in this deck in Oaken Summons does actually mean that the Cursed Disciple being pulled out might be kind of difficult for the Priest to deal with, because obviously 1 damage being dealt is not easy for the Priest to handle.
Priest is always going to suffer from this Dustbreaker problem that some people highlighted before, which is it's a great card until it's blowing up your own board.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a little bit clunky.
Yeah, it's really not what you're looking for in this matchup, because you want to be pulling ahead around turn 4 and 5 so that you can activate your cards like Scalebane and really start to turn up the pressure. So here for Kranich, I wouldn't be surprised if we just see an ignore on this Cursed Disciple. Just leave it alone for the moment, because he's not even trading into the Tar Creeper quite yet.
Yeah, as it stands, he's looking okay to develop a board. Picks up his own swipe. Took it very quickly as well, though. Marco Lotus isn't a card.
He's not
and
a card.
It's open deck list.
It's open deck
it's
list.
Open deck list. That's why he takes it quickly.
Swipe is in every kind of ramp druid.
Yeah.
As I've seen actually a few that have 1 swipe in it, but yeah, in general, especially in a Malagos druid, you are putting 2 swipes in every deck. Thanks for playing the
Being
idiot.
a
I'm sure,
while.
Neil. Yeah, only pretending for the audience. I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly it. Cheers, Derek. Get you a drink later. This is what we talk about where he didn't trade last turn. Kuonet has this awkward 5/1 minion that looked good at the time, but it's going to take a little while to actually clear stuff up here.
Yeah, it's still pretty good now. The fact that he can clear off the Tar Creeper whilst playing the Jade Blossom leads him into, 7 mana on the following turn? Which means probably you can fit in Tar Creeper and him, or something like that, to start pushing back against this board.
Swipe looks kind of good about now. So Spiteful Summoner next turn. Druid with the age-old Druid issue that it can't deal with big minions easily.
Yeah, it is really going to be suffering against that. But maybe with the play of just Ultimate Infestation as quickly as possible, it can start to fight back against what Kranich is doing.
Kranich taking the card that's in his opponent's deck.
That one was actually a little bit more difficult because, I mean, obviously it's Wrath. Like, I'm not going to try.
No, I know what you
make it
mean, though. But you look
difficult,
at it, there's no Maya Keep in
it. Yeah, like,
deck.
Maya Keep is a really good card to play in these kind of big-ish druids.
Except when you fetch it by, exactly.
Right,
That's the problem. That's why it's not in this particular build.
Exactly. But now on this turn, still fairly respectable carrying along here for Kuonet. Just the Dark Arakoa is a nice way to fight back against what's going on. It's got pretty nice stats against the board. And it's coming down before Spiteful Summoner, which means even if a 10-drop is summoned, obviously it could be an 8-drop as well, it's getting in a value trade before it's killed off by that giant minion. Yeah,
Kranich. This is what you said, it's like turns 5 or 6 where it really starts kicking in, and that's exactly what's happening, especially with the Summoner. Pretty wide range of options available here.
Yeah, Free from Amber isn't even necessarily that much worse than Mind Control. The Grand Archivist is summoned.
Goodness, this is disgusting.
Oh my god, he can Mind Control it.
Right. So
and
there's only Mind Control and Free from Amber in the deck. If he gets a Mind Control, he can steal his Taunt minion.
Disgusting.
And now he's got to work out the odds of, do I even want to attack into this? Because I've got a 2 in 3 chance. I think, is there 2 Free from Ambers or 1?
2 Free from Ambers and 2 Mind Controls.
So one of those in his hands, we've got 2 from 3 chance of just stealing it if he doesn't attack in. And that's what he's gone for.
God. That is absolutely absurd. I don't think there's anything that can pull the Druid back now. And this is exactly what we were predicting. The Priest had, a decent early game. They were playing on curve, getting in a bit of chip damage.
How's your 10 mana card you were talking about looking
absurd.
now?
Look at this. This is completely insane. He's even thinned his deck over Mind Control, which probably wouldn't even be that good here. It would be a bit too slow. And Kuonet just cannot win now.
It'll be fine. He'll play Ultimate Infestation.
But he doesn't
think that's going to happen.
That's not going to do it. He doesn't even have Plague in his deck, so he can't even stall for a turn. This is just disgusting.
Hi, I'm a Corridor Creeper. Yeah, hi, Corridor Creeper.
Yeah, you know it's a dire situation when Corridor Creeper comes down and you're still like, well,
it's just lethal,
I'm
right?
about 15 mana behind.
Right. It's going to be the lethal if it's not lethal anyway. Always nice when you got that out as a caster.
Yeah.
I think it might need the swipe, not sure, but definitely is.
And
2-2.
Here for Kuonet, not even necessarily punished for keeping the quest at all, because he already had a ramp spell, drew another one. It was just the perfect turn 6 for Kranich, and also a very nice start up to get there. I think even going for things like developing the Curious Glimmeru instead of going for swipe is a really nice play to make sure you're locking down the board, making sure, you know, you don't need to play swipe to kill off 2 1-health minions. It's not actually very high tempo.
Yeah, just damage.
Just damage.
Damage. That was a good risk he took there. He could have ruined a lot of his board there if he had gone for not the mind control play.
Yeah.
The other thief member could have turned up. But he realised even if it does, so what?
It's
if
fine.
I lose this board trading, it might be too slow if you're trading, say, 2 of those minions.
Yeah.
So working that one out. And now it's like 2014. We've got Kranich playing Hunter for all of the biscuits.
And I feel like he's left himself with a pretty good matchup to close things out. As we saw in the last game, we can see another ridiculously powerful Spiteful Summoner turn potentially coming down. And even before then, there's even stronger earlier game for the Hunter. Being able to lock down turns 1 through 4, follow up with Houndmaster, things like that, is what the Druid will really struggle with, especially once again, as there is no Plague in Kuonet's deck.
Yeah, and Kranich will be extremely comfortable in this position. He's played a lot of Hunter. The old Dignitas lot all played Hunter after Hunter after Hunter back in the day, and he will be particularly comfortable, even more than usual on this. A bit hard to say that someone's going to be comfortable on a deck when they've been to 2 World Championships.
And now,
so, you know, when they have been to 2 World Championships, they can pretty much play anything.
but here Kuonet keeps the Jungle Giants again, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding how much the Druid relies on the Jungle Giants to win. I would assume in this kind of matchup where the Hunter is very low curve, can get off to some very explosive starts, you would much, much rather hit some of your ramp cards to get up to your more powerful turns like Dark Arakoa, Corridor Creeper, and Ultimate Infestation. I think that was probably the win condition for Kuonet. I don't like keeping the quest in this particular situation.
Yeah, he obviously feels that he needs it, like you say, and be interesting to see as it progresses how that will look on the board, whether it does seem like it's needed or not. Kranich has got so many options here. He'll try to avoid playing the deckhand, maybe.
Yeah, I think
in this situation,
because he knows the quest was kept, and I think the other 2 cards were just tossed and drawn from the deck. He thinks it's unlikely that there is a wild growth in hand, so he doesn't want to give a good target for the hero power. So I do obviously much prefer going for the beast here. You can follow up with a captain on the following
so good
turn.
with patches as well.
Exactly.
Which isn't drawn, but now he's got a decision to make with this Direwolf. Because he can play on curve and try and coin into summoner on 5, or he can go with the original plan. And actually, he's going to go with saving this coin and just meandering into turn 5 with a big summoner. What happened with the Druid last game where it just can't deal with a wide board. Kranich is going to present that wide board a little bit later again, like he did last game. Wait till turn 5 or 6. There's no massive hurry. Just present it at some point.
I kind of disagree with you in that line of thinking. For Kranich, I think getting it out as early as possible. Not that there's a hurry necessarily, because it would obviously be good on turn 6, but I really like getting it down on turn 5, and that's definitely what he's gearing up for with this line of play. Saving the coin means, okay, your opponent can hero power here to take out one of the minions, but then all of a sudden they're doing a 3-mana hero power, which is awful. And getting out the Spiteful Summoner on the next couple of turns is ridiculously strong and will almost certainly close out the game.
There goes one of the 2 Call of the Wild, though. That can definitely be a problem if the other one comes to play.
I don't want to see that happen. I think Kranich deserves to get this Spiteful Summoner off. The fact that he's saved it so perfectly to get down on turn 5 will be very strong for him indeed, as Kuonet is punished for his line of play of attacking into the Diamol with his hero power last turn. He should maybe have seen the captain coming down, but at the same time, if the coin was... He knows that the coin is still in hand, and it wasn't coined out on turn 2, so maybe he just assumed it can't be there, or he would have gone for it.
So this is like the lull before the storm, right?
The what, sorry?
Enjoy yourselves. The lull.
Right, okay.
Yeah, enjoy yourselves twice. Going to have the coin into the Spiteful Summoner next turn, where we find out what 9-drop turns up.
I mean,
what 9-drops are you a fan of?
I like a Soggoth.
Yeah?
Big Soggoth fan myself, yeah.
I like Toantas. because we're in the right country for it.
I mean, that was a great joke, but you should have done it in the priest game when there's an actual 9-drop and one.
I was waiting, at some point.
Okay, mate.
So yeah, let's see how it goes on next turn.
I think if that were actually physically possible, I would agree with you that a Taiwantis would be perfect.
I know.
That was a great. By the way, I have to give it to you. I'm just angry at you for doing it.
Anger my co-casters at the start of the day. How can that go wrong?
And now, with Lethal available for Kranich, he will be closing out the first series. Fantastically done. Didn't even need Coin Spiteful Summoner because he locked down the early game so heavily. And this is where the weakness of Kuonet's lineup becomes clear. Because it's Conquest,